The morning sun hit Chhota Naldhera with a blinding, clinical glare that offered no warmth. Mira sat on the splintered wooden bench, her body rigid against the biting mountain wind. Her breath hitched in the freezing air, turning into thin, white plumes that vanished before they could linger. She clutched her satchel against her chest, the leather strap digging into her shoulder. Inside, the digital recorder held weeks of captured folk songs, the only evidence of her long journey through these hills. She glanced at her wrist, then back at the empty, winding road. The bus was 30 minutes late. A deep, unnatural silence pressed down on the valley, broken only by the occasional snap of a frozen branch. She pulled her arms tighter around her chest, staring into the distance, waiting for the sound of an engine. A low, rhythmic rumble vibrated through the ground before the vehicle finally crested the ridge. The red HRTC bus appeared, its paint chipped and faded, moving with a labored, uneven pace. As it neared the stop, the engine emitted a sharp, metallic grinding sound that set Mira's teeth on edge. The driver slammed on the brakes, the tires skidding slightly on the icy asphalt before coming to a complete halt. The doors hissed open, releasing a cloud of exhaust that swirled into the freezing morning air. Mira stepped up into the cabin. The interior was thick with the suffocating smell of diesel and damp, unwashed wool. She moved toward the middle row. At the front, the driver sat motionless. He was a man with a heavy, dense growth of hair obscuring his mouth, his hands locked firmly onto the steering wheel. He did not look at her. His eyes remained fixed on the icy road ahead, staring through the windshield with a blank, glassy intensity. Mira walked down the narrow aisle, her boots muffled by the grime-caked floor. She intended to take the very last row, but stopped short. A passenger sat in the corner seat. He was perfectly, impossibly still. The bus hit a rut in the road, causing the entire frame to shudder and the windows to rattle in their tracks. Yet the man did not sway. He did not shift his weight to compensate for the motion. He did not even blink. Mira felt a sharp, icy prickle of dread crawl up her spine, a primal warning that something was fundamentally wrong with the figure in the back. She gripped the back of a seat, her knuckles turning white. The air around the man seemed to hold a different temperature, colder and thinner. She watched for the rise and fall of his chest, but there was no movement. He was a statue of flesh, anchored to the seat. The dread intensified, shifting from a vague unease into a sharp, focused terror. She was trapped in a moving metal box. Mira could no longer endure the stillness. The pressure in the cabin felt like a physical weight pressing against her eardrums. She turned, her boots scraping against the floor, and gripped the metal handle of the seat in front of her. Her voice emerged, thin and brittle, in the stale air. "Excuse me, are you feeling unwell?" The man did not shift. He did not tilt his head. His eyes remained locked on the front windshield, staring at the blurred reflection of the road. A beat of silence stretched, thick and suffocating, before he spoke. The silence is only heavy when you are trying to listen to what is hidden inside it. The sound was not a voice in the conventional sense. It was hollow, devoid of any warmth or vibration, echoing as if projected from a deep, empty vessel. Mira took a sharp step back, her hand sliding off the seat handle as a cold sweat broke across her forehead. She looked at his profile, searching for a pulse in his neck, but the skin remained taut and motionless. The cabin seemed to shrink around them. Mira braced herself against the aisle, her throat tight, unable to draw a full breath. The man's mouth began to stretch. It widened, pulling past the natural limits of human anatomy, a jagged, tearing motion that defied the structure of his jaw. The skin at the corners of his lips split open, revealing gray, necrotic flesh beneath that pulsed with a faint, sickly rhythm. He did not blink as the tissue frayed. Then, the hollow resonance of his voice vanished, replaced by a crisp, synthetic cadence. Every syllable was perfectly modulated, devoid of organic imperfection. "Welcome to the channel," he whispered, the sound vibrating through the metal seat frame and into Mira's palms. She tried to step back, but her legs felt heavy. He turned his head then, a slow, mechanical rotation that clicked with the sound of grinding bone. "If you want to hear more stories, make sure to stay until the very end. The cabin lights flickered as the boundary between the man and the machine dissolved entirely. The bus lurched. The driver slammed the wheel hard to the left, the tires screaming against the frozen asphalt as the vehicle skidded toward the precipice. Mira was thrown against the side window, her shoulders slamming into the glass with a dull thud. She gasped, her hands scrambling for purchase against the cold pane. As the bus straightened, her gaze was pulled downward, locked onto the valley floor below the Rudrayan deodar tree. The landscape was a stark, blinding white, but the center of the clearing was a riot of motion. 20 figures stood in the deep snow. They were ash-colored, their skin blending into the frost, moving in a frantic, synchronized rhythm that defied the biting cold. They did not shiver. They did not stop. At the center of this ring, the old caretaker stood motionless, his hands gripped around a heavy brass lantern. The flame inside burned with a sharp, sickly, greenish-gold light. The figures circled him, their movements jagged and desperate, a silent, rhythmic dance that seemed to pull the very air out of the valley. Mira pressed her forehead against the glass, her breath fogging the surface, watching the green light pulse in time with the frantic, soundless steps. Mira pulled her face from the glass, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She spun around, her hands balled into fists, ready to scream at the passenger for the horror she had just witnessed. She lunged toward the middle row, her boots skidding on the damp floorboards. The seat was empty. The space where the man had been sitting was completely vacant, the vinyl cushion barely indented, as if nothing had occupied it for hours. She gripped the back of the seat, her knuckles turning white, and scanned the aisle. The bus was silent, save for the rhythmic grinding of the engine. There was no sign of him, no movement in the shadows, no sound of breathing. Resting on the center of the cushion was a cracked laptop, its screen glowing with a harsh, artificial intensity. It was open, the keyboard missing several keys, and the display flickered with a single, blinking red phrase in Hindi, Agla Bag. The cursor pulsed in time with her own rapid heartbeat, a steady, rhythmic demand. She reached out, her fingers hovering inches from the screen, feeling the static charge radiating from the plastic casing. The bus hit a bump, and the laptop slid slightly, the red light casting a jagged, bloody glow across her palms. The air in the bus cabin grew heavy, thick with the metallic tang of ozone and old grease. Mira stood frozen, her eyes locked on the blinking red text of the laptop. Above her head, the overhead ventilation slats groaned. A long, rattling inhalation pulled through the narrow metal grates, sounding like dry leaves dragged across a tombstone. She held her breath, waiting for the driver to speak, but the front of the bus remained unnervingly still. Then, the vents exhaled. A wet, bubbling whisper spilled into the cabin, vibrating against the plastic walls. It was not a stranger's voice. It was her own. The pitch, the cadence, the slight tremor of her own panic, it was all there, perfectly replicated by the unseen force in the ceiling. Good girl, you didn't look behind you. The words hung in the stagnant air, dripping with a synthetic, mocking sweetness. Mira clutched her satchel, her fingernails digging into the leather as the whisper repeated itself, looping the phrase with increasing speed. The bus hit a sharp incline, the engine roaring in protest, but the voice from the vents remained constant, a persistent, rhythmic parasite feeding on her terror. She realized then that the sound was not coming from the machine, but from the very space she occupied. The rattling breath from the vents grew louder, a mechanical wheeze that filled the cabin until the air itself seemed to vibrate. Mira sank onto the floor, her legs losing all strength. She pressed her palms against the cold metal floorboards, trying to ground herself, but the bus began to hum with a low, dissonant frequency that made her vision blur. The engine noise cut out entirely, yet the bus did not slow. It surged forward, accelerating into the white haze outside the windows. There was no road left, only a vast, featureless void. Mira looked at the laptop. The blinking red text began to multiply, scrolling across the screen in a frantic, cascading waterfall of light. It was no longer just a prompt. It was a script, and her own movements were being transcribed in real time. She watched her own hand reach out, trembling, though she felt no command to move it. The whisper from the vents shifted, becoming a chorus of voices, all of them hers, all of them hollow. The bus windows turned into mirrors, reflecting not her face, but the faces of the 20 figures she had seen in the valley. They were standing in the aisle now, motionless, their ash-colored skin blending into the gray light of the cabin. The laptop screen flared with a blinding crimson glow, and the phrase, "Ugla bag," expanded until it consumed the entire display.